There's two types of landlines. There's Rotary and there's touchtone. Now, Rotary is pre-touchtone. So if somebody had a Rotary, that means they're probably going to be a little bit older.
That's the dial, ladies and gentlemen, the dial.
That's right.
On the phone.
Rotary. Yeah, people like, what, Rotary? Yeah, it actually counted the number of clicks to figure out what number you were dialing.
I remember playing with that at my grandpa's house. It did not work.
Some people collect those things.
Mike collects those things.
No. You're listening to Helical Brew. Episode 47 kicks off our exclusive two-part mid-year hiring check-in with Ian Cooper and Chris Gaetani. Today, hiring shifts, comp resets, and a cliffhanger you'll want to hear. Welcome, everyone, back to the Helical Brew, where we are joined with Ian Cooper and Chris Gaetani. Welcome.
Hey, everyone.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Glad to have you with us. We are super excited for this episode and have been because Ian and Chris are founders of a company called BioMed Recruiting. And as you might guess, we're going to be talking about recruiting and all things around it during this episode. The title of this episode is the 2025 Hiring Curve, Biotech, Automation, and What's Next. And this is going to be part of our Science Means Business. So taking a little bit of a detour from our AI Thought Leaders series and heading into the business side of things where, hiring is a big topic these days. We see and hear a lot about it. So we are super excited to be talking with Ian and Chris today. So just a big shout out to our audience. Thank you for watching. Thank you for viewing and being viewers of the Helical Brew. It's amazing. I was counting the number of episodes as I was posting the last podcast, and I just want to say thank you for following us along the way. This is the Science Means Business, a series on Helical Brew, where we dive into trends shaping careers, companies, and innovation in biotech and automation. Today, we're joined again by Ian Cooper and his business partner, Chris Gaetani of BioMed Recruiting, for a mid-year check-in on the 2025 hiring market. If you've been wondering what's changed since January when we spoke with Ian, or where things are headed next, this episode is for you. So thank you guys for joining us. And before we dive into the hiring trends, Ian and Chris, can you give us, our listeners, a quick intro and reminder of your background and what BioMed Recruiting focuses on?
Absolutely. So I've been recruiting since I graduated college, but 5 years ago, I found the people I wanted to be exclusively working with. So that's anybody involved with lab automation. 4 years ago now, actually to the month, started BioMed Recruitment, and I wanted there to be an agency exclusively focused on lab automation as well. So we are the first ones that only hire for either companies selling automated technology, or we also do hire for labs and build out their internal automation teams as well. Beyond being specialized, I think two things that are a big focus for us are solving hiring inefficiencies. So a couple examples would be the time spent by the hiring team and also really trying to do our best to increase turnover rates because we think that's a huge problem. But Chris has been with me since the beginning, and I couldn't have done it without him. So really appreciate all that he contributes.
Yeah. And Ian couldn't have said it better. So I'll focus a little bit more kind of personally on, what drew me to working with Ian. I was doing a couple different things right out of school, not really sure what I wanted to do, but I had met Ian through a personal relationship, and he helped me get my first recruiting job as a generalist, and had a lot of success in year one. But then, kind of the whole world got turned upside down with COVID, and Ian was smart enough to recognize some trends in the biotech space, primarily being lab automation, and he sold me. So we were connected throughout my first job, shared a lot of success and wins with him. And so he was kind of tracking the beginning of my recruiting career. And then he had the gall to just say, hey, I'm going to do this. You want to come join me? And I think it took me all of about 2 weeks to quit my job and join BioMed Recruitment as employee number 2 and a co-founder. So I couldn't be happier about the last 4.5 years. I think, we really picked the right space, and super excited about connections like this and just continuing to be a kind of a recognized group in the space. So just thrilled with the start, and yeah, thank you guys for having me on.
A proper 2 weeks notice.
I didn't rush him.
Very professional.
In recruiting and sales jobs, you get walked out pretty much the same day. They don't want you hanging around.
I more so mean I spent about 2 weeks thinking about it, but it was in and out the same day.
Very cool.
Well, and here we are several years later, and that's fantastic. I thank you for sharing that background on how you guys formed the company, and it's become a well-known entity within this market, which is a market I also hold very dearly for myself. I started as a roboticist in general industry for robotics, and I found that just working in this space is so fantastic. So I share that with you in terms of, staying in this industry and the experiences I've had with it. So it's icebreaker time. Our famous icebreakers. That's right. Crack the ice with the question. And it would be great. Love to hear from both of you on this. What's one resume or job trend that you've seen this year that either surprised you or made you shake your head?
So I'm going to answer this in a slightly different way. I hope you don't mind. Something we
How dare you.
do a little bit differently. I'll still bring it back to the overall theme, but we actually don't put that much emphasis on the resume, which may seem a little bit crazy as recruiters, but
That's
resumes,
fair.
especially now with AI and different tools, they've all become very generic and basic. So of course we still have candidates create one. We still introduce them to our customers, but the companies we hire for actually get a video introduction from the candidates where they get the opportunity to sell themselves from the role. And they also answer a couple questions that have been predetermined with the company. And they're one take only. So it does replicate an interview scenario. That's just a couple of examples. But why I bring this up, and it made me shake my head in a good way, sometimes resumes just don't accurately reflect a candidate's experience. And a great candidate may get passed up on when a hiring manager just looks at their resume. So there was a candidate that we really, really liked for a variety of reasons, but we knew he just stood out a lot more via video or when he was going to be speaking with the hiring manager than he would have if we were just to introduce his resume. So thankfully, we got the opportunity for him to create those videos and open the door for the conversation. And again, he did extremely well. He ended up getting the job. And it's just great because I have a feeling that the hiring manager wouldn't have even spoke to him, even if I made a case on the side with notes and really pushed for it, may have not even spoke to him because of his resume, because there are certain things that didn't completely align with the requirements. So hopefully there's more trends like that throughout.
I do remember you
recruitment.
saying like how different the approach is from BioMed recruiting is, which is really interesting because you create all these like specific profiles and you have like videos and questions that come up. And I think in this current job market, to follow on kind of what you said in January, right? This current job market, everything is just like flooded because everyone is so, distraught looking for work that anything that can make a difference is really important from the standpoint of like actually personifying that individual's skill sets, right? So that's great.
Absolutely. We do our best to solve each side's problems, right? So for the candidates, what can we do to help them stand out? For the hiring managers, what can we do to cut through the noise and get them the most qualified people and have them exclusively be talking to those people? So without going into too much detail about our process, that's what we've been able to do.
Definitely. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
See, I told you, Mike, I'm better on video.
It's a big difference.
Ian took the words right out of my mouth. So I'm going to have to think on my feet a little bit here, but just to kind of piggyback off of what he shared, it's such a positive trend, I think. And with hiring being scarce, the biggest priority for companies right now is retention, right? It's making the right hire. And being a long-term hiring solution. So seeing companies and hiring managers prioritize those things, right? It's not the technical skill set usually that gets someone either fired or has, a reason for a candidate to leave. It's all the soft skills. It's all the cultural things. It's all those intangibles that you can't snuff out through a resume. So I'm really happy to see that trend going. But on a bit of a lighter note, I would say that the shake my head is these darn M dashes from ChatGPT in
Those are grammatically correct, though. Like, I use them personally. I know people always think, like, AI generates them, but, like, it's grammatically, like, it's defined. You're supposed to use them for certain
I
cases.
think that's the steel man to the argument, but in reality, gosh, nobody was using them, in my opinion, of what I saw 5 years ago. So just got to go. You got to do the editing, just 5 minutes to get rid of those M dashes.
Tweak it, touch it, look at it, read it
just
a little bit, just give it a little bit of a
Yeah.
personal touch because the algorithm can figure out that it's an algorithm, right?
ELA
Like,
teachers everywhere are
I have
shaking their
identified
heads.
this as an AI that's located at this server in this part of the world, you know.
Yeah, my mom's a speech and language pathologist, and she was like, "No, it's right. That's right. That's correct." And I was like, "It's besides the point. People aren't."
I'm with your mom.
That's a good point of view to have in your
Mhm.
line of
Yeah.
work, I gotta say, you know, that because that's also communication is so important in this space of recruiting and interviewing. So yeah, that's fantastic. And I you know, frankly, haven't heard the kind of insight into the resume versus, you know, other aspects comparison quite like you put it there. So really, really refreshing actually, because I think a lot of folks are in general put off a bit by what they hear about resume processing, you know, and what's going on. So, you know, that's all the more reason to work with a professional as far as finding your next gig. So we're going to dive in a little bit. We're going to take the pulse check. I think it's you know, a great topic to start with, to kind of take the pulse of the industry and where hiring is at. And really, since you've been on, Ian, like what's changed since January about, you know, what are companies hiring for now versus back then? Has there
Absolutely.
been some changes?
So I can give an overview more so on the biotech and automation market and do that more from a company perspective. And then I'll allow Chris to do that maybe more from a candidate perspective. I did a brief poll on LinkedIn to see what people thought in terms of spending budgets for labs. And it was good because a lot of people that voted were either those that working at the labs involved with purchasing new automated equipment, and then also a bunch of sales professionals that work at the companies selling the automated products. So as we know, 2024 wasn't the best year in the economy or market, but 41% said roughly the same. 53% said more spending last year, and only 6% said more spending this year. So not the most positive outlook into the year. It didn't really surprise me. In my eyes, things just haven't changed that much since last year. It's been a lot of maintaining. I think a decent amount of companies are slowing down. The vast majority are just maintaining, and then some are growing. I think why companies are slowing down, there's a ton of economic factors. And I think there's a lot of better online resources out there and podcasts and newsletters to listen and read than to hear me talk about that. But overall, economic factors. I think biotech was specifically affected by the COVID peak. You know, there was definitely a surge the couple years following COVID that slowed down. So of course, like there's going to be an effect there when companies were growing extremely fast and then they had to slow down for a variety of reasons. I think it's tough for companies within life sciences to get funding at the moment because they're having to prove like an immediate revenue model, and that's not always labs.
Yeah.
That's you know, of course, as known within life sciences, it's like we're going to be able to turn a profit for you within a couple of years. So I think those may be a couple of reasons why biotech and life sciences are affected maybe a little differently than generally the economy. But of course, it's not an easy time within the economy right now. I think trying to be a little bit more optimistic and positive, and why Chris and I are still very grateful to be specialized within lab automation. We're very 100% about being in the right niche. I think the reality is that labs have nowhere near the technology or automation in them that they will have in 5 years, 10 years, et cetera. Like labs are going to continue to look a lot different, and people's jobs will. So there's a lot of opportunity in the industry, I'd say, because of that. If you think about it, like how much more automation there will be in every lab, people's jobs are just going to change. But that's how it always has been historically. It's hard to call. Like if you look at some of the jobs that people are doing right now, the job titles, what their responsibilities are, that would have been impossible for somebody to guess and predict 20 years ago. So historically, jobs change frequently.
True.
And I think that people's involvements within automation have already changed. I think that there's more and more hiring being done for the companies in a good place that are selling automated hardware and software. And a lot of those lab automation professionals that maybe worked directly for a lab before are now still finding it easier to get like a field application specialist or scientist job. That's just one example. But actually, Paul, because we're very on top of, we're working mostly with companies selling automated products. So as you can imagine, the companies that are at SLAS are the companies that we have hired for and want to hire for. We're very on top of hiring trends within all of them. So there are 345 companies at SLAS. 128 of them are hiring right now in the US. So that's not terrible in my opinion at all.
Not at all. Yeah.
Now, that's a good perspective, though, because I think a lot of people are feeling depressed because it just feels depressing out there. But you're right. Most of the people that are getting jobs, myself included, right? You come from the lab, you want to work for a biotech, biopharma in the lab, and then you find positions for the people that are hiring, which are consultancy companies, the people who make hardware, the people who do the integrations. Those people are still finding places. So you kind of have to shift your thinking a little bit to get into a new niche, right?
Absolutely. I think looking specifically at the product companies, there's a lot of the larger ones still in growth mode. I think they've just had so much cash, stability. They have great leadership teams, consistency, that they've been smart about weathering the storm and been able to be strategic still and are able to grow. A lot of the smaller companies we see doing really well, and those are the companies we primarily hire for, are the ones solving problems for companies with a smaller budget. So an example would be like, how can we sell you an automated solution that fits within your budget instead of having to spend X amount? That what used to be the norm. Or their target market is companies like big pharma with large budgets, because there's still a lot of spending happening there. And you can break into a big pharma company in one location, and then that just expands to internationally. It can really open up things for your business. So I am an optimist at heart. I still do think there's a lot of reasons to be positive. I see a lot of negativity online, and I sympathize with it. And I think it is very tough for job seekers at the moment. Still, we're doing our best to help. We're obviously very, very small. I want Chris to cover a little bit more about what he's seen from a job seeker's perspective, but I hope before we move on, that helps from what I'm seeing from a company perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. Thank you for that overview. I think the, perception from the job seeker market and the, let's say, if you want to call it the reality, which is the hiring market, right? That's what that ultimately folks need to align with if they want to get recruited into new positions, is that, it's a constant back and forth between the paradigm shift of the company, the new opportunities that become available as a result of that, because they're adapting to the market. It's just a circular, I feel like it's quite circular, right? The market makes a change. The companies make a strategy shift that might eliminate some positions, but it also opens new positions. And so, Chris, I'd love to hear your perspective on the job
seekers. But just to touch on that question a little bit more, for what they're hiring for in Q1 versus now, companies are basically not hiring as much still. It's just the certain companies that are hiring for different kinds of positions, right?
Yeah. And
I would say compared to Q.
I don't know.
Sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead, Chris.
And I agree with so many points there. One specifically that you brought up, Mike, is adaptability, right? And it's taking the right approach to the ground kind of shifting beneath your feet. So you can look at it from a ton of different perspectives, right? Whether it was, the COVID hangover, you could look at it as a candidate I'm talking about. You could look at it as, the COVID hangover. You could look at it as, the SVB failing, the AI boogeyman. But the truth is people are like highly, highly adaptable, especially people in our industries. They're very smart, very capable. And it's about leveraging the skills that you already have, but then maybe thinking outside of the box about where you can provide a little bit more value to companies. So if you always saw yourself as somebody that was going to start their career on the bench and maybe get some exposure to automation, and maybe you did in your first job, do you know enough, and do you have the soft skills, and do you have the drive to continue to develop those to maybe be a customer facing person for a vendor, somebody providing great technology that's a bit more flexible, right? It's not reliant on investment. It's reliant on sales and providing a great customer experience and a great product for the labs. So can you transition into something like that, right? So just not being too rigid in terms of your expectations.
And your definition of yourself.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I think that, there's a lot of situations in which people are coming out of very traditional, either PhD programs, taught by people who have done things one way for a very long time. And, one thing, it's a whole nother topic, is a little bit more automation exposure at the university level, and just inspiring kids essentially to get a little bit more versatile with that kind of stuff. So just being flexible and again, leveraging the skill set you have, but then treating your job search like your job, your research capable, right? So doing the research on the things that are highly attractive, and being a kind of a utility player where you're not just somebody who's going to be on the bench, but you could partner with one of these lab companies and really drive value for solving very specific problems, right? So not a ton changing in terms of the type of hiring that's happening now. I would say, if we wanted to paint very generally, specifically with the vendor companies, the companies providing technology, prioritizing sales and prioritizing very technical field-based employees and engineers and scientists who not only provide a technical asset, but are out there being a catalyst to sales, to service contracts, to all these things that drive revenue. And then if we want to talk about just specifically within the labs, what I've seen and what Ian touched on a little bit is fractional work, right? So companies that need very specific projects, very specific deadlines, fractional work has definitely picked up with lab automation specialists being prioritized within the lab. So I would say that that's probably the biggest trend internally. And then again, more of that commercial element for the service provider, or the vendors and the service providers.
I do like what you said about fractional work, because I see that in my company, because we provide staff augmentation services, right? And we get pulled in for proposals a lot because that fractional work is important. It's better than hiring like full comp packages, right? Getting experts on board. So that is picking
and
up.
it's the time.
True.
Yeah, it's the time horizon, right? There's a very opaque time horizon as to when money's going to free up. And I heard a really interesting statistic the other day, and it piggybacks off what Ian was talking about, just the times that are changing. Y Combinator released their last season's portfolio, and 25% of the companies that were invested in through Y Combinator were vibe coded AI companies. So you're talking like 1 or 2 person companies. So that's where the money's going right now. So it does create an interesting dynamic for the biotech industry that needs a lot of capital and needs a lot of runway before they generate revenue. It's just
I love all your analogies. The AI boogeyman, and then the other one that you said around the COVID hangover, because I sure feel like COVID was this event that I'm still hungover from.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That one's definitely stuck, and really interesting what you said about the, adaptability of things. And we actually had, it was great. We had Kate Halter on for an episode, and what a great story of transitioning from bench to vendor and application side at working for one of the vendors, right? Neuroscientist becomes, applications scientist for pipetting, right? So it's again, it's customer facing, it's sales, and the willingness to do that is, I couldn't agree more. Being a customer facing person for most of my career, it's more important than ever not to just, isolate into specific research roles. And that's a great point. I never thought about that. The venture money is not going to traditional biotech startups as much as it is, as it used to be. So again, the larger, more established vendors might be a better target for that.
Well, here's a perfect case study, right? Ian and I just worked on a search with one of our great partners, and somebody that our partner was very, very, very interested in actually came from a big pharma company and worked with this vendor on site and provided a ton of value. And as soon as her role was dissolved, this vendor, who's got funding and is selling a great product, gobbled her up one interview, and so it's being adaptable, being open to that flexibility and providing value in a customer. And the things he noticed about her was, obviously the understanding of the technology, but it was she was always available. She was always available to answer his calls. She was always available to find a solution for their instrumentation on site. So those are the things that if you have if you're lucky enough to have that interface with a vendor, always consider that, an option, because those stories do happen.
Yeah, that's really cool. Have you seen candidate expectations change in the last since January, let's say, in the last 3 quarters in terms of comp flexibility and mission?
A ton. So just to start with the flexibility piece, piggybacking off what we just talked about, being flexible about, are you going to be an on-site person? Are you going to have a 10-minute commute to your lab, or are you going to be, traveling 40, 50% of the time? That flexibility just gives you a ton more options. Like, it really opens the doors for you. But yes, definitely seeing comp expectations come down in that post-COVID hangover. Just comp went through the roof, right? And some of the crazy.
It's crazy. It was nice. You're like, oh wow, I'm worth so much money.
Crazy. So it's been an interesting thing for Ian and I to juggle with some of these, 2-3 year out of college, fresh grads looking for, $165K on a base to do some very straightforward method development. It's come down, and we've seen people be more focused on mission and building skill sets, it's really nice because there's a ton of great opportunity out there right now to do a lot for companies and provide a ton of value. So yeah, definitely a lot of adjustments being made there.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm seeing it in also, when I'm talking with folks about, projects and robot programming and whatnot, I feel like that there's a lot more crossover of skill sets, especially within, automation deployment within because, look, you can only have so many people, you can only afford so many people, you need, more jacks of more trades, in the building to be able to deploy some of this stuff. And also have an idea about the science that it's being used for, even though they might have a head of automation role, they still need to be connected to that. So are there any roles that have become harder or easier to fill along the way? Is it
nothing's getting easier to fill, that's for sure, because hiring managers want more for less, and those are the times they're confronted with
and seeing 200 resumes at a time instead of
it's a different problem, right? But I would say the ones that again are being harder to fill, or we're just seeing a bit more scarce, are those internal automation positions that were, kind of flying off the shelf 2020 through 2022, 2019 through 2022. I would say the vast majority of the recs that we worked on to start were those. And now there's been a big push to the field and the customer facing engineering positions.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, customer facing, it's where it's at. You heard it here on the Helical Brew. And this is a new one. This is a new one for us. So you just will inaugurate this, the 2025 Hot or Not segment. And so I would love, from both of you, love to hear a guest pick trend on what's heating up or cooling off. Ian, you're up.
So I would say, straight to it. I would say what's cooling off, most companies are realizing that hiring managers can't handle the entire recruitment process by themselves. Okay. So as you can imagine, a lot of companies that we end up ultimately hiring for don't have an internal recruitment or talent acquisition team that work directly for them. Sometimes they have 1 or 2 recruiters, but that can't handle the amount of openings that the company has. And sometimes a job opening requires some type of specialization where a recruiter that only talks to, for example, lab automation professionals all day, every day, would be able to tap into a much deeper market and be able to help a lot more. So I think that there is this myth around, because there's a lot of great candidates on the market right now, hiring is just easy, but that's just not the case. And there's still a variety of reasons, which I can go into later on, why hiring teams are still really struggling at the moment.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. This wraps up part 1 of our mid-year hiring check-in with Ian Cooper and Chris Gaetani. Next week in part 2, we'll pick up right where we left off with Chris's hot or not take. Plus, we'll dive into why ghosting has become such a big problem in hiring, how job seekers can reroute a stalled job search in 2025, and what hiring teams should rethink if they want to attract the best automation talent. So make sure you're subscribed and join us next Sunday for the conclusion of this 2-part conversation. You don't want to miss it. Thank you for joining us on the Helical Brew. We're glad to have you with us. For more episodes, please visit our website at helicalbrew.com. That's helicalbrew.com.